When you hear the name Alan Turing, I bet your mind jumps straight to World War II, right? Cracking the Enigma code, and, well, rightly so. But in today's explainer, we're going to look at Turing not just as a brilliant wartime codebreaker, but as the undisputed architect of our entire modern digital paradigm. From theoretical computer science all the way to computational biology, Turing didn't just advance existing scientific fields, he literally authored entirely new ones. I mean, every keystroke on your computer, every single encrypted message you send, it all operates within a world that he conceptualized.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to trace his journey, starting with his early quest to understand the human mind, then defining the universal machine, his crucial wartime efforts, his post-war pivot to AI and biology, and finally, his tragic persecution and enduring legacy.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the quest for the mind, focusing on his isolation and autonomy.
Born in London back in 1912 and separated pretty early on from his parents, who were serving the British Empire in India, Turing developed this fierce independence. But, his intellectual development was actually profoundly shaped by a devastating personal loss. While at Sherborne School, Turing found his very first true intellectual peer in a brilliant older student named Christopher Morcom. They collaborated intensely on advanced science. But tragically, in 1930, Morcom died suddenly from tuberculosis. The grief absolutely shattered Turing, but it also acted as this massive philosophical catalyst. He became totally consumed with deciphering what he called the nature of spirit. You see, he wanted to know on a purely mechanical level if the human mind could exist independently of the biological machine of the body. This tragedy essentially sparked a lifelong obsession with the relationship between mechanism and consciousness.
Moving on to part 2, defining the universal machine and the limits of logic. While he was studying at Cambridge and Princeton, Turing decided to tackle this massive open question proposed by David Hilbert, called the Entscheidungsproblem. Basically, it asked if there was a definitive mechanical procedure to determine the truth of any mathematical statement. To answer this, Turing conceptualized a theoretical device in 1936, which we now know as the Turing machine. He imagined an infinitely long tape, a read-write head, and a table of instructions. But he didn't stop there. He described a universal Turing machine that was capable of reading the description of any other machine from the tape and perfectly simulating its behavior. Why does this matter to us? Well, because this is the conceptual birth of the stored program computer. It proved that the physical hardware of a machine could remain completely fixed, while the software, the data on the tape, dictates its function. He essentially mapped out the boundaries of all modern computation before a single microchip was ever built.
To really put his genius into perspective, it helps to look at him alongside some other historical giants of mathematics and computing. Look at Charles Babbage. He conceptualized mechanical computing, sure, but it was Turing who provided the mathematical proof. Ada Lovelace wrote the very first algorithm, but Turing addressed her philosophical objections about machine originality. Alonzo Church and Kurt Gödel tackled similar logical limits, but it was John von Neumann who later took Turing's theoretical abstraction and actually translated it into practical computer architecture. Turing kind of synthesized theoretical logic and mechanical potential in a way nobody else had ever done before.
Which brings us to part 3, breaking the Enigma code and the incredibly high physical stakes.
At Bletchley Park during the Second World War, Turing's abstract theoretical brilliance was drafted into highly practical, literally life-or-death service against the cryptographic infrastructure of the Third Reich, specifically the German Kriegsmarine and their infamous Enigma machine. To really grasp the massive scale of his impact, just look at this number, 84,000. By 1942, Turing, as the head of Hut 8, had designed an intricate electromechanical machine known as the Bombe. By exploiting logical contradictions in the Enigma's design, the Bombe was decrypting over 84,000 intercepted messages every single month. This staggeringly huge volume of intelligence allowed Allied convoys to route safely around U-boat wolf packs in the Atlantic, which undeniably altered the outcome of the war and saved countless lives.
But Turing never actually viewed his theoretical work and his practical engineering as two separate silos. This quote here stems from a legendary series of debates he had in 1939 with the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein argued that mathematical contradictions were just harmless abstract anomalies. Turing vehemently disagreed. He believed that abstract computational logic absolutely must answer to physical reality, because if your logic is flawed, the physical bridge collapses.
All right, part 4, artificial intelligence and biology. This is his major post-war pivot.
Following the Allied victory, Turing shifted gears back to civilian science and started laying the absolute groundwork for machine learning.
In an unpublished 1948 report, he hypothesized that an infant human brain is kind of like an unorganized machine that learns through environmental stimuli. He mathematically modeled this with what he called A-type machines, basically random networks of logic gates. He then introduced B-type machines, which actually possessed modifiers that could be trained by reinforcing desired outputs and penalizing incorrect ones. Listen to this. Decades before they ever became viable, Alan Turing literally invented the fundamental architecture for artificial neural networks. It's just wild. So by 1950, he formalized his thoughts on machine consciousness in a truly seminal paper. He figured that arguing over the exact semantic definition of the word think was totally pointless, so he bypassed that messy philosophical debate entirely by proposing a practical, empirical benchmark. He called it the imitation game, which we universally recognize today as the Turing test. It's simple. If a human interrogator engaging in a text dialogue cannot reliably distinguish the hidden machine from the hidden human, then the machine must be granted the attribution of intelligence.
This directly countered an old argument known as Lady Lovelace's objection. Ada Lovelace had argued that computers can really only do what they are explicitly programmed to do. They can't originate anything new. Turing countered this beautifully. He recognized that rigid algorithmic inputs in complex systems can actually produce deeply unanticipated emergent behaviors. Machines, he noted, took him by surprise all the time. He understood that learning systems would eventually yield unpredictable brilliance.
And as if inventing AI wasn't enough, in 1952, he takes this breathtaking leap into theoretical biology to explain how a completely spherically symmetric embryo actually develops into a complex, structured organism. He proposed a mathematical reaction diffusion model of hypothetical chemicals that he called morphogens. Their interaction basically destabilizes a homogeneous state, creating stable patterns. Using differential equations, he beautifully explained the growth of leopard spots, zebra stripes, and even those Fibonacci spirals you see in sunflowers. He effectively invented computational biology before anyone even knew the structure of DNA.
We have to turn now to Part 5, Persecution and Tragic Demise, the story of a mind destroyed.
Despite operating at the absolute limits of human capability, Turing was forced to confront the oppressive and devastating realities of mid-20th century British law. Physically, the man possessed an incredible constitution. He found immense mental clarity in long-distance running. In fact, in 1947, he achieved this phenomenal marathon time of 2 hours, 46 minutes, and 3 seconds. That time placed him 5th in the UK Olympic trials, barely 10 minutes behind the gold medalist. But despite his sheer physical and mental fortitude, his life was about to unravel catastrophically due to forces completely outside the realm of science.
In 1952, during a minor burglary investigation at his home, Turing's innate honesty led him to disclose a relationship with another man. Under the laws of the time, he was charged with gross indecency. To avoid going to prison, he was subjected to a grueling year of chemical castration, and his security clearance was stripped, abruptly ending his vital government work. Just 2 years later, on June 8, 1954, he was found dead from cyanide poisoning beside a half-eaten apple. Now, while the coroner ruled it a suicide, historians still debate to this day whether it may have been a tragic accident, but regardless of the exact mechanism, an unparalleled mind was lost way too soon.
Let's move to our final section, Part 6, the modern digital paradigm, his legacy, and some enduring inquiries.
For decades, the Official Secrets Act kept the true magnitude of his wartime heroics totally classified. But as the truth eventually emerged, it sparked some major historical debates. Starting with the biggest one, did Alan Turing actually invent the computer?
Well, it really comes down to the distinction between theory and hardware. Turing did not solder the wires or build the first physical electronic computer. Engineers like Tommy Flowers and John von Neumann built the actual hardware. But Turing provided the fundamental mathematical blueprint. He invented the concept that defines what a general-purpose computer actually is. Without his map, there is simply no territory to build on.
Here's another big one. Did Turing single-handedly break the Enigma code? Pop culture loves to portray the myth of the lone, tortured genius solving everything in total isolation.
But the historical record shows that cracking Enigma was actually a massive, highly collaborative effort. It built directly upon the brilliant early work of Polish mathematicians, and Turing relied heavily on incredible colleagues at Bletchley Park like Joan Clark and Gordon Welchman. That being said, Turing was undeniably the chief theoretical architect of the bomb mechanism. He designed the automated logic that made large-scale decryption practically possible, which ultimately saved millions of lives.
And finally, we return to the very philosophical question that sparked his life's work in the first place, following the tragic death of his childhood friend, Christopher Morcom. Does passing the Turing test actually prove that a machine is conscious?
You see, Turing deliberately sidestepped the word consciousness because, well, it's a massive philosophical trap. The Turing test is purely a measure of indistinguishability in performance. It doesn't prove that a machine feels anything internally, it only proves that it can perfectly simulate human output. And as we wrap up this explainer today, surrounded by incredibly advanced AI and large language models that owe their very existence to Turing's blueprints, we're left to ponder this really provocative thought. As our machines become ever more adept at perfectly simulating human performance, will we ever actually be able to prove if they've crossed that threshold into true, independent consciousness?